So I'm wondering, how do you respond to that kind of a perception? That we don't need to take care of the guys at the top, we need to take care of the folks in the middle.
I think that's a great point, and that is certainly the spin on the campaign from this administration. Let me throw a couple of numbers at you. One is to say, if you do, what is the Buffett rule? Because I'll drive the Buffett rule and saying that's going to be a big thing about solving this problem. That's $4.7 billion scored by the Congressional Budget Office. And if you the difference between what the president's saying in terms of not raising taxes on couples that earn $250,000 and individuals that earn $200,000, and so you suspend in all the Bush tax cuts, into all the Bush tax cuts for everybody else. That's about an $80 billion figure. Now we've got a problem over $1 trillion a year and growing, and that $80 billion figure is saying that if we pull that money out of the economy, it will have no effect on the economy. That's true. So that's not true. So I think it's going to be greater than $8 billion. The fact is that these economic policies haven't been working. We're still at over 8% unemployment. And so I think we know we need pro-growth economic policies to move this country forward. Now I got to tell you one thing on this class warfare issue. I think we do need to look at tax reform. We've got to look at tax reform. The fact is that our code is so riddled with all these special interest deductions and credits and all that stuff as part of corporate and individual welfare at a different level. And we've got to look at all those things. And we've got to make sense of this tax code. Yeah.
Thanks, Congressman. I think everybody in this room is, maybe with the exception of Joe, are very closely aligned. Very closely aligned on these issues. For me, there's one thing that matters. We have 83 days until election. And I'm committed to electing and re-electing conservatives and defeating Barack Obama. Your opponent is characterizing you as the Tea Party candidate. In your district, is that something that is helpful to you or negative to you? Because, for instance, in the Arapahoe County Tea Party, there are over 100 people turning out to meetings with energy and resources they could get to work if it would be useful in your kind of a district.
Oh, the question is does the characterization of me as a Tea Party candidate, does that help or hurt? I honestly don't know. But I do know this. I tell you what, the people that, this whole thing about the Tea Party being an organization, I don't see it as an organization. I see it as a movement. Right. It is a movement against people that are rightfully distrustful of a government that is so much bigger than we can afford and so much powerful that it ought to be under what I believe is a framework of limited constitutional government. And so, I think that use he's obviously trying to focus on his own base and do that and say that this guy's too extreme. He's the guy who certainly voted to raise property taxes on seniors. I think that's a little extreme. He voted for the death penalty in all circumstances, co-sponsored that bill. I think that's a little extreme. So I kind of think he's extreme.
Good.
Thank you for recognizing that most of the people in here wouldn't. Until last night, or about a tenth of a second last week, it made the news that the IRS gets built out of $5 billion a year by fraudulent tax returners. Yep. I heard no outrage from either side of the aisle. Please address that.
Now, the question is about fraud in tax compliance. Surprise, been going on for a long time. I think that's the whole thing about simplifying the tax code. We need a flatter, fair, simpler tax code that is simply more equitable. That is so complicated that the cost compliance is such a burden on this economy that, and I think that there's a lot of things that are just unfair. If you want to talk about some of the benefits of wealthy, it's certainly the tax code. And so we absolutely need to reform, and that's got to be part of the equation. And certainly I think Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan both support that, and Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, certainly supports that.
Just clarify, you pick them out and either speak up or I'll have a mic to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Mike, I think that by now most conservative Americans are pretty convinced that if we're on the same path, we're now insolvent and will collapse eventually as a nation financially. The Democrats are telling a different story. The liberals are not wanting that story to get out. If they do believe it, they probably don't even believe it. What is the best way to tell the story to the independent voters that we've got to make a change now if we want to save America?
Okay, the question is, how do we get that message out to independent voters? You know, about the financial crisis. Let me tell you that our not-so-secret weapon is Paul Ryan. And what I would encourage, and I was with him on Monday night, before Tuesday he did his appearance over in Jefferson County. And I think that Paul Ryan needs to be utilized to go in front of the media, to tell the story, to go over the math with the American people. And I just think, and when you look at things like Medicare reform, so what does he do? And I'm stunned at how, the average, the cost is going to be raised, for the average Medicare recipient. Well, he's requiring wealthier people to pay more for their share. You know what? And I'm surprised that the Democrats don't embrace that. Certainly when it comes to tax policy, they embrace it, but not on Medicare. And the notion of having it just like for federal employees and members of Congress, where there's pre-approved plans that are properly administered, and there's one plan that's selected as a benchmark. And if you choose a plan above the benchmark, you're going to pay more for it. If you choose the benchmark, you're not. In Medicare, if people want to stay, that Medicare is going to be one of those options, the standard fee-for-service program. And so there's an element of competition. Plus, the government doesn't know how to deal with the fraud issue, and fraud is rampant in the Medicare system. But we know that private entities know how to deal with fraud. Yes, State Representative Cindy Aker, please.
Congressman, what is your position on getting rid of the charitable contribution exemption? Because my nonprofits all over the state are really concerned that that's the next wave.
The question is about charitable contribution. I think, whether or not I support continuing, I support continuing. I think some things need to be tied up. I think that it's spilled into some political thing, it kind of, what's truly charitable versus what's just another mechanism for campaign finance. So I think we do need to take a look at that. I think that we're losing that in America. The notion of people to people helping each other, that I think is so important, as opposed to being reliant upon a faceless bureaucracy for support. So I think it's something that is very American, and we ought to retain in the tax code.
Congressman, you were in the military, I think. And I'm personally concerned about the people.
Pick up, Cliff.
At the people of Southwest. 4 years ago, unbeknown to the Lavoisier people, they went to and protected the country of Israel. And I feel like this president is just on the border of doing something like that now, primarily because I think Syria is going to go into that area and things like that. And I think if it wasn't close to election time, he would have done it all beforehand. And number two, sir, how are we going to combat all this nasty, hateful bullshit that's flying out about you?
Okay, let me first of all, and Cliff told me something today that was truly astounding that I really didn't know. That I believe that you told me that the United States Air Force was actually a branch of military service, and I'm always amazed in this job how much I do learn on a daily basis, and that stunned me.
Let's see you fly.
My test scores weren't there. Let me just say this. Here's my fundamental concern about what this president might do. And I take this from experience. In 1980, I was in the Middle East with the United States Marine Corps. I was a lieutenant. I was a rifle platoon commander. And so, so initially we were sent up to Norway to do some amphibious exercises up there. And then what they did, and we knew that we were going to go to the Mediterranean after that. But then what they did is they took us and took who they wanted off a much larger operation.